The mainstream media, the ANC, the supporters and the followers of communism in South Africa will have you believe that really South Africa and America's tensions started in 2025 after Donald Trump took over as the president in the United States of America. They'll have you believe this, and then they'll tell you that South Africa just needs to endure for about 2 to 3 more years. And once Donald Trump is out of office, things will finally return to normal. The problem with this entire approach is that it ignores the last 5 years of the US increasingly asking questions about South Africa. Yes, even under the now, I guess everyone knows, senile President Joe Biden, both Republicans and Democrats asked serious questions about South Africa and South Africa's ever increasing loyalty towards the East and their continuous betrayal of the West. So things will never return back to normal for South Africa unless the Americans sort of collectively suffer from dementia and just forget what South Africa did during the COVID era, what South Africa did during the Biden presidency, what South Africa is doing now with the Trump presidency. I have a feeling, first and foremost, that Trump isn't going to lose the next election. And by that, I don't mean that Trump is going to run for the next election. I believe it will be J.D. Vance, but J.D. Vance will be placed there by Trump to continue the MAGA movement. And I see no evidence at the moment that suggests that J.D. Vance will not run away with that election. In fact, I think we're going to have Republican rule in America for probably the next decade, if not more. So South Africa sort of hoping and wishing that Trump will be out of office and then things will go back to normal. I think it's just going to get worse. Literally last night, however, Trump fired the biggest shot of them all. For a while now, Donald Trump in South Africa has gone back and forth, or I should really say the ANC, because the rest of us don't want to be enemies of the United States. It's just the ANC that has this death wish and is part of this death cult called Iran and the terrorist nations of the world. But Donald Trump fired off last night on Truth Social with the following message. The United States does not attend the G20 in South Africa because the South African government refuses to acknowledge or address the horrific human rights abuses endured by Afrikaners and other descendants of Dutch, French, and German settlers. To put it more bluntly, they are killing white people and randomly allowing their farms to be taken from them. Now, a lot of people immediately jumped on this and said, not a single farm has been taken. But that is sort of, again, playing very much word games. I'm currently working on a video about one of the most successful psyops in South Africa's history, and it's literally this. The ANC over the last 30 years has managed to change the way people associate words and actions to reality. The problem is that people will say, well, not a single farm has been taken because the ANC has paid farmers for their farms. But no one seems to know exactly how this works. When the ANC arrives at a farmer's farm, they don't come with hopes and dreams and good tidings. They come with a goal. We want your farm. How much for you to give us your farm? A lot of these farmers have no interest in selling their farms. A lot of these farmers are happy to farm there. For some of them, their farms have been in the family for generations. But all of them understand that if they say no, the farm will be taken anyways. This is what the South African government wants. They want the farm. And so, yes, you're at the moment still being compensated for that farm, but the farm is still being taken away from you. When I tell you that you have to sell me your house or else I will burn it down, you selling your house to me did not change the fact that you did not want to sell the house to me. It simply means that I can now claim that, hey, I bought this house from you fair and square. I did not, in fact, take it. The new legislation, however, passed by the ANC, the Expropriation Act, with nil compensation, because nil is also apparently a number, that would make it almost impossible for anyone to even get money from the coercive tactics of the ANC, and instead the ANC will just say, give us your farm or else. And then the ANC can say, well, we did pay him. Nil. That's what we paid him for his farm. So yes, farms are actually being taken. They're just not being taken for free, but the new legislation will now make it that they can take these farms for free. Let's look at the next claim, because people will say there is no genocide happening in South Africa. What the hell are you talking about? this AfriForum PDF or this AfriForum report actually shows you the devastating numbers of farm attacks in South Africa. And you will note that the only thing that's really gone down in South Africa's farm rates have not been the actual levels of attacks. There are still hundreds of attacks happening in South Africa every single year. What's gone down is the number of murders per attack. And the only reason that has happened is because farmers have had to protect themselves. But then I'll point you guys to this table over here. This is the only table that I could find that does a out of 100,000 approach, which is how crime is normally reported, because it gives us a statistically relevant number that we can actually play on. So if we look at the population of South Africa from the mid-2016s, right, 55 million people. We look at the murders for 2016 and 2017, that's 19,016. That gives us a rate per 100,000 of 34. That's an incredibly high number, and it is a really bad number. But then we look at the population of white farmers plus families in 2016, and we find that that's 125,000. The murder rate is 66. The rate per 100,000 is 52.8. That is for white people, the farmers, and their families. This would be extended families, and a lot of these numbers would actually also include some of the families that live on the farm that might not necessarily be part of the farmer's family, but rather just workers and their families living on it. So that's 52.8. And then you have white heads of households on farmland in South Africa is about 47,000, and the murders there are 51. That gives you a rate per 100,000 of 108. So it is more than 3 times more dangerous, or it's 3 times more dangerous to be a white farmer in South Africa than it is to just be an ordinary citizen. It's double the risk being a white farmer than just being someone who lives on a farm. And then when you actually go and you say, what is the murder rate currently in places like the Cape Flats? Here you find that it is about 100 per 100,000 people. So being a white farmer in South Africa is more dangerous than living in the Cape Flats. The Cape Flats is a gang area. So when Donald Trump says that there is a genocide happening on the Afrikaner community, he is not wrong. The statistics themselves bear this out. And this table, by the way, isn't just from nowhere. You have the sources here. The South African Police Service themselves, Stats South Africa themselves. It's their stats. So this isn't out of nowhere. This is literally, you can find these stats on official documentation. But of course, when the government looks at these stats, they never go to the per rate out of 100,000. They just go to the physical number, right? So they'll just say, oh, well, it's 66 people that were murdered on farms. What the hell are you talking about? And it's like, well, actually, that's not how you do it. You don't just count the raw numbers, because that doesn't give you any statistically significant insights into what is actually happening. But okay, so Trump is not lying here. Trump then goes on to sort of blame the fake news media, and we now have a new bill that is being tabled in the United States government that actually seeks to punish South Africa even further, calling out things like News 24, because they have been part of the propaganda arm of the African National Congress for quite some time. And then Trump goes on to basically say that they will not be including South Africa in the G20 held in Miami, Florida, and that they will be pushing for South Africa to be excluded from more international organizations. Of course, to this, you immediately had people like Paul Myburgh, who said eventually someone brave has to stand up to the bully on the playground and others will follow suit. I'm proud of South Africa, and I think geopolitically, this could be a great turning point. But even if not, at least we didn't just lay down and take their S. The problem for someone like Paul Myburgh is that this is the bully crying bully. The South African government, the African National Congress, has been a bully, but it's been a sneaky little bully. Let's just go back and just visit some of their greatest offenses. South Africa has been part of the AGOA Act for almost 30 years. In that time, South Africa has time and again stabbed America in the back. Part of the AGOA agreement is that countries who form part of it must not in any way undermine the sovereignty and the national security of the United States. It is ultimately an agreement that benefits the nations who are part of it greatly. So it's not bad for the Americans to say, hey, guys, you can't do things that's going to undermine our national security. South Africa has time and again sided with countries like Iran, time and again sided with countries like Russia after they invaded Ukraine, time and again sided with countries like China, one of America's biggest competitors. South Africa has continuously stabbed America in the back. And yet now that America is heading back, South Africa is going, well, how dare you, you absolute bully. The African National Congress bullies its own citizens continuously. Think about every single law that is constantly being passed that people ask nicely, hey, could you not do this? The Bala Act, for example, and the ANC just goes, screw you, we'll go ahead with it. Expropriation without compensation. Again, people ask nicely, hey, could you please not do this? Screw you. Then there's the uncomfortable truth of the genocide on Afrikaners, where the ANC is spending more resources trying to deny that this is even happening than they could just actually fix the problem. Like, just show the world that you are in fact serious about this. But of course, the rest of the world doesn't really care about this. It's only currently the United States of America, and there is a reason for it. The rest of the communists and the socialists in Europe are happy to see Christians and white people being slaughtered. That is why you have not heard a peep from any of these nations about the Christians being murdered and slaughtered in Nigeria, because they don't care. These are Christians. Why would they care? It's not Muslims, and it's definitely not people that they worry about. So, Christians dying is actually a relatively good thing. Our government has continuously sided with regimes like this. Our government has continuously played America off against every other country in the world, and yet somehow we now want to cry that we're being bullied. And then the final bit of misinformation that I do want to speak about here is from this person, TK Nala. Now, TK Nala is no stranger to stupid takes on X. Every once in a while, her takes will pop up, and I'll roll my eyes because what the hell is actually happening here? But this is sadly not a sort of contained approach, right? Everyone thinks this. At least all of the communists think this. And when I say communists, I really do just mean uneducated people. Okay, but all of the communists actually believe this. AfriForum cannot suffer from selective amnesia. They are now asking for what the government can do to restore relations with the United States, yet it was their misinformation that led us to this point. Is that actually true? The answer? No. Donald Trump first spoke about the genocide happening in South Africa with the Afrikaner community in 2018. The Americans first started to remark on how South Africa is playing a very unfair game and wanted to remove South Africa from AGOA in 2023. Donald Trump first started talking about South Africa's unfair treatment of the United States in the late 2000s. AfriForum only visited the United States in February of 2025. The math does not math, as they say. Now, I realize that people like TK Nala did not do math, and if they did, they scored 143 out of a possible 190-something countries in the world. So TK Nala would struggle with basic math. But I will tell you that the math here does not math at all. Even a math genius like Einstein would not be able to bring these numbers together unless AfriForum had a time machine and went back to the year, I think it was 2007 or 2006 or something, when Trump first started talking about South Africa's unfair treatment of America. Unless that happened, I don't see how your numbers are actually working out. But of course, if you're a communist, you don't have to have your numbers work out. You just simply have to, speak out of your bottom, and most other communists will just go along with it. So can Trump actually kick South Africa out of the G20? Technically, no, but he can absolutely deny them visas to come to Florida. Is it possible for Trump to exert pressure on all other nations in the world to cut South Africa off from the rest of the international community? Yes, that is possible. It was America that started the boycott of South Africa under apartheid. And they eventually systematically got every other nation on board. Why? Because America is the greatest consuming market in the world. Every other country will have to make a choice. Either we do business with America or we keep the doors open to South Africa. And most countries will choose America in a heartbeat, because even if they might like Cyril Ramaphosa, maybe they think he's a cute guy, they won't choose their own nations. Or they won't choose South Africa over their own nations. And if it comes to doing business with America or doing business with South Africa, it's a no-brainer. you're gonna do business with America. And then, of course, there are those of you that say, well, we'll have China, we'll have India, we'll have our partners in BRICS. Yeah, China is on the verge of going to war. Over the last few days, we have seen a massive amount of propaganda pop up by the Chinese with fake accounts all over X, basically praising and singing the praises of China and telling people how amazing China is and how great China is. And all of this is in preparation for their coming invasion of Taiwan. The problem, you have pretty much every other country in Asia gearing for war. Japan is gearing for war. South Korea is gearing for war. America is moving troops into the South China Seas. All of it getting ready to stop China. And China, as far as a country goes that is vulnerable to attack, is incredibly vulnerable to attack. China has a couple of key regional sort of installments that if you target those things like the 3-point dam, for example, you could pretty much wipe China out in one foul swoop. Yes, you'd kill billions of people in the making of it, or millions of people rather. Sorry, you won't kill all of them because some of their cities aren't really in the wake of that. Sorry, just had to do a bit of geography here. But fundamentally, you could cripple China almost overnight. They're not a great nation because pretty much every single one of their installments is on the coast already. They don't really have inland sort of areas. So, you could just fire from the ocean and you could do some serious damage to China. So China really is going to be in for one hell of a war here. If you thought that India might come to our aid, well, India is staring down a 3-partner warrior between Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, which actually threatens to become a nuclear war. So if you think that wartime economies like China and India is going to continue to do great business with South Africa, you have to think about this, right? The oceans around these countries are going to be a hellscape. You're not going to be able to get goods into China. You're not going to be able to get goods into India, not on any large scale. So if you thought that, we'll just replace whatever we lose with the Americans with these other nations, think again. That is absolutely not going to happen. The fact of the matter is that South Africa has chosen its side. It's chosen its allies, and it may have chosen very badly. Everything that follows here is a result of the hubris and the arrogance of the ANC. This has nothing to do with America being a bully. America is merely done being played by South Africa. The ANC have overplayed their hand one too many times, and the Americans have finally woken up and said, this is enough. We can't keep abiding a country that continuously stabs us in the back. Everything that has happened here is on the doorstep of the ANC. And I recognize for a lot of the victims and the professional victims in South Africa, this is hard to hear. You would like to think that there is someone else to blame for your misery. No, this one is on you, as is every other suffering that you have endured for the last 30 years. And, no amount of victimhood is going to change that. Of course, that is just my opinion, so let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of all of this. And then if you like what I do and you think more people should have access to the content that I make, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing this video around with as many people as possible. This was a pretty long one. I normally don't make long videos like this, so if you watched until now, you are an absolute trooper, and just write in the comments, trooper, right there, so that I can see who of you actually made it to this point. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members. To become a patron, link in the description down below, or join button right below this video for YouTube membership. As always, I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.